In the middle of an impenetrable forest, darkness thickened over the ancient ruins. The silence of this place was broken only by confident steps on the massive steps and the clicking of claws on the stone slabs. At the entrance to the ruins, two people met: a red-eyed, ferocious monster and a dark-haired young man. The beast attacked first, tearing the air with a deafening roar and a wave of magical power. In turn, the young man created a magic circle and cast a spell of permafrost. A feeling of something unreal and oppressive covered the entire space in front of him. The image of the goddess Ikva appeared above his head, and a stream of cold magical power rushed towards the monster, instantly freezing it into a block of ice. After a few moments, the darkness cleared from the ruins, and the dark-haired youth breathed a sigh of relief. In the main metropolis, the prestigious HEIR family rightfully occupied the topmost places of great magicians. The great mage and leader was talking to his third son, Shannon HEIR, about the latter's admission to the Obelisk Academy of Magic. The boy was considered a genius in his generation, head and shoulders above even his older brothers. So Shannon was full of hope and confidence in a wonderful future. But 2 years after entering the academy, everything turned out not as planned. The next test of practical training began, and the professor called the students from the list. The first to be called was Benjamin Samard. The professor advised the student not to be nervous and to do everything at his own pace, to which he replied that he couldn't do worse than Shannon HEIR anyway, so there was no need for him to be nervous. Unfortunately, this was true. For all his genius and power, Shannon was unable to use interactive magic. Magical interactive beasts were released onto the scoring field. Benjamin Samard, using a magic panel, was able to summon a flame protuberance in a matter of seconds and destroy the beasts. When it was Shannon's turn to take the test, the guy began to collect mana in his heart to form a magic panel. But everything happened very slowly, and the animals attacked before anything happened. The guy lost, the test was not passed. Feelings of pain and resentment rolled in waves. The day it became clear that Shannon was not compatible with modern interactive magic, his father stopped believing in him, and even sent him pills that would destroy the magic circle in his heart. But the guy refused to accept them and decided to follow the path of traditional magicians, despite the fact that there was practically no information left on the teaching methods, and that was only on paper. After a day of school, Shannon returned tired and exhausted to his room, most of which was filled with mountains of books. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a grimoire on the table, which was definitely not in his collection before. The book was leather-bound and rather worn. Taking the book in his hands and opening it, the guy saw that it was written by hand in a rather clumsy handwriting. The author of the book was Ribel Weitner, one of the greatest magicians of the past and the founder of the magic empire Weitner. The boy remembered that he often came across this name in memoirs as a child. Suddenly, the grimoire began to glow in his hands. The book slipped from his palms onto the floor, and the pages began to turn by themselves. At that moment, a voice sounded in his head, conveying Ribel Weitner's thoughts about magic and a warning that the book would only open to someone who looked like the author of the book. The content of the story became a new starting point in the life of the younger HEIR. The next day, Shannon was eating breakfast alone in the school cafeteria, as usual, when a male voice called him. The one who called out to him was named Jin Suvel. Despite his frivolous appearance, the guy was considered one of the best sorcerers in the academy, and the only one Shannon could call a friend here. The guy sat down next to him at the table, and they started talking. Jin reminded his friend again that if he was bothered or something was bothering him, the latter should not remain silent, but be sure to tell him everything. Then Shannon decided to share with his friend the strange book that appeared out of nowhere, and that the book essentially offered him to die as a magician, since the entry on the last page called for the destruction of the circle of magic in the heart. Later that evening, Jean came to Shannon's room to see the book for himself. But no matter how hard the guy tried, he couldn't open it. The pages seemed to be glued together. Having made sure that the book really did not give in to Jin, he advised not to take risks and just throw all thoughts about it out of his head. Assuming that it was just someone's evil joke, the guy went to his room, and Shannon picked up the book again and calmly began to turn the pages of it. Suddenly, he discovered that the book, which had previously only had the first few pages filled in, now had writing on another page. The voice became audible again, and it stated that using the mana circle in the heart, although a natural method, was only for ordinary people. This puzzled the guy and made him think that the traditional method might not be entirely correct. The book glowed even brighter again and hung in the air, and the voice declared that if the boy wanted to become Ribel's disciple and inherit his will and knowledge, he must first destroy the existing circle in his heart and created anew in his head. After that, the book closed and fell to the floor, and the guy froze in fear, trying to comprehend everything that was said. It was generally accepted that mana, the source of magic, was destructive to the brain, and its entry into it could lead to mental disorders and even death. From the outside, these demands clearly looked like a call to suicide. Without coming to any concrete conclusions, the guy decided to go to bed. The next day, Shannon decided to show the book to the professor at the academy and ask him to check for any curses or oddities. The professor couldn't open the book, but he checked it anyway. Having made sure that there were no curses and for him it was just a book, he returned the volume to the guy and told him not to waste time on nonsense, but to put more effort into practice. Because the teacher was unable to open the manuscript, the boy began to hope that it was real and not someone's joke. Already sitting in his room in the evening, he tried to gather his courage. Shannon took out the very pills that his father had sent to destroy the mana circle. Fear and reluctance to give up magic consumed all his thoughts, and his hands shook. Plucking up his courage, Shannon swallowed the pills. As the mana circles attached to his heart began to crumble, an uncontrollable pain swept through his body. This pain meant to the boy that he no longer existed as a mage. Then he began to form a new circle in his brain, and as soon as the mana poured into his head, the pain exploded with even greater force. And then there was a feeling as if the guy had died and was floating in zero gravity. And around him the voices of the mana spirits were heard, and Ribel's voice called him a student. When Shannon woke up in the morning, lying on the floor, he realized that he was still alive. Looking into the book, the boy saw that symbols had appeared on the empty pages. The voice of the magician addressing him appeared in his head again. The magician said that the book was called Idrid, which would help the boy become a great magician, that all the accumulated wisdom, all his knowledge contained within these pages, now belongs to Shannon as his direct disciple. At that moment, tears of relief flowed from his eyes, and the guy burst into tears. Sitting at the lecture, Shannon listened to the teacher with half an ear, immersed in the open notes of the book, learning more and more new and interesting things with each page, including the fact that mana has its own will, and for most people into whose brain it entered, a conflict of two consciousnesses occurred, which led to negative consequences. But Shannon's brain was not subject to the will of mana, and therefore was resistant to interactive magic, which was activated through the embedded chip in the brain. At this point, the teacher made an announcement to the class that there would soon be a midterm test, and the rules for taking it had changed. Looking at Shannon with a smile, the teacher informed him that from now on, anyone who failed the test would be expelled, and that this proposal came directly from the HEIR household. Later that evening, Shannon went into town to rent a simulation training arena. It was the best way to get a hands-on understanding of everything the book taught. Having paid for 1 hour and having the premises at his disposal, the guy began his training, calling 10 wolves at once. To pass the midterm test at the academy, it was necessary to destroy all the wolves in 12 minutes and 32 seconds. To begin with, Shannon decided to master his new mana circle, which was called the Circle of Infinity, and attacked the wolves with the element of water. Compared to the circle in the heart of others, the circle in the brain caused mana to circulate throughout the entire body, causing the result to be more powerful. Thanks to the Infinity Circle, Shannon was able to release incredible power that had been dormant within him until now. Such power seemed amazing and incomprehensible. But what was most awe-inspiring was the realization that this was only the first circle of Weitner's magic. And the greater and higher the level of knowledge of magic, the stronger Shannon could become. After an hour, the young man finished training and returned to the academy. Earlier, the receptionist recognized the third son of the HEIR family and became curious about what result he had been able to show in training. The result amazed him because it was 6 minutes and 37 seconds, essentially the level of international competitions. It was so surprising to see this, especially given Shannon's reputation, that the worker even began to doubt the serviceability of the room's equipment. The Circle of Infinity was not easy for Shannon to grasp at once. What was given in the book was very different from the basics that the guy had previously studied, and the descriptions were rather vague and intuitive. According to the teachings of magic, there is a certain wall of enlightenment, and every magician encounters it at least once, realizing the limit of his mana. To increase his limit, a mage must focus on pumping mana throughout his entire body. This is what Shannon decided to do first, without even noticing how more than 10 hours had flown by. In the morning, on the way to class, the boy met Jin. Shannon was so focused on his thoughts about the circulation of mana that he seemed absent-minded and unfocused, which worried his friend. At an early age, Shen had 2 circles of mana in his heart and was recognized as a genius, but now the boy only had 1 circle. And this made the guy worry, not knowing how he could move forward to become perfect. But then the words my father had once said long ago came to mind, about how such a concept as an ideal is nothing more than a fetter on development, that it is just an illusion created by the arrogance of humanity. The ideal is a lie. And then, as if by a click, everything fell into place. It became clear that the key to Ribel's teaching was the freedom of the imagination, allowing one to embody spells without any formulas. Interactive magic had a high casting speed, but the spells were formulaic, while the method Shannon was taught was wild and broad, like thought itself, allowing magic to change shape. Although the magic itself consumed stamina in huge quantities, the ability to use this magic brought the guy into indescribable delight. After all, if he had managed to overcome this very wall, he could have reached the greatest heights. While Cheyenne was sitting in one of the free classrooms during recess, a professor found him and told him that he had a guest. The guy was surprised, but when he heard that his father was the guest, he realized that it was expected and even guessed why he wanted to see him. The father was waiting for the boy in the reception room, and after the professor brought him in, they were left alone. The conversation immediately turned to Shannon's studies at the academy, and the boy's father expressed his displeasure with this and the fact that he never took his pills. In response, Shannon stated that he was finally starting to get something right, and he would never give up magic. The father did not like what he considered his son's illusions, and the fact that he continued to waste his time on empty things, although he could have already achieved something great in another field. But the guy stubbornly declared that he intended to become the greatest magician of the generation, no matter what, and lead the House of Magic. The argument dragged on, and Shannon challenged his father to a bet. If the boy can enter the top 10 best students of the academy in the midterm assessment, then his father will have to support his desire to become a magician by any means necessary. If Shannon can't, then the guy will leave the academy and devote himself to theory, as his father wanted. His father sighed, not believing his son's statement, but agreed to the bet. It seemed that, although he did not admit it out loud, he hoped in his heart that these were not just empty words. A few days later, the final form of the exam was announced. The test will be held in a one-on-one combat format. In other words, it will be a fight between students. They will also be observed by people from the Tower of Magicians. This statement made some students very happy, especially Benjamin Simard, because he had long wanted to personally humiliate Shannon, not only with words but also physically. The information about the exam format excited all the students, especially the news that observers from the Magic Tower would come. Everyone knew that the Magic Tower was an international organization of magicians, created by the 12 strongest of them. All the magicians in the world dreamed of joining this organization. While Shannon was pondering all this commotion and its implications, Benjamin Simard called out to him. From the very first meeting, they could not get along, and when it became known that Shannon was not capable of using interactive magic, Benjamin tried to humiliate the latter at any opportunity. And this time he declared that he would be Shannon's first opponent and that he would definitely win, because he wants to take revenge on the guy for losing 5 years ago. Their rivalry began 5 years ago at a tournament for young talents. In the final, Benjamin completely lost to Shannon on all counts. Then they began to call him a loser. And it was for this reason that he was so happy about Shannon's inability to use magic, despite all his talent. However, Benjamin never got the reaction he wanted. On the contrary, the guy sarcastically asked why he should be afraid of someone like him. This statement made Benjamin very angry, because he was used to the fact that he could not refute his words, and he tried to put the latter in his place. In response, Shannon, without fear, reminded him of his loss at the competition of young talents. He also promised that he would definitely repeat that incident with the same outcome. Sometime later, Shannon HEIR discovered articles on the internet with his name in the title. The guy guessed that Benjamin's family most likely had a hand in their appearance, but he was quite pleased with this fact. After all, he had no doubts about his victory. And the more attention they pay to this, the better it will be for him. At that moment, the phone rang, and Shannon's father's number appeared. He called because he also saw these articles and asked why his son provoked their appearance. The guy honestly admitted that he wanted to attract as much attention to himself as possible during this test, since they had made a deal. The man could not understand why his son was doing this, because he was sure that the latter would lose. In response, the guy confidently stated that the people who already considered him incapable of magic were wrong, and he would prove otherwise. And first of all to him, his father, since his goal was to become the greatest magician in the world and the greatest head of a family in history. The conversation was not exactly harsh, but not very pleasant. In the end, his father clearly warned his son, "If you disgrace the reputation of the house, you will bear responsibility for the consequences." On the day of the midterm exams, everyone gathered in the arena. In addition to the students themselves, many spectators arrived, including journalists. When Shannon and Benjamin entered the arena, the latter began to provoke the guy from the very first seconds. Shannon just laughed at his attempts and thanked him for helping him demonstrate his genius as a magician. After all, he was going to defeat him with his first circle spells. The referee gave the signal and the fight began. The spectators around the arena froze in anticipation. Benjamin was the first to enter the battle, activating 2 fire spells at once and directing them at Shannon. The guy was able to easily dodge them, easily recognizing them as a third circle spell, Explosion. The guy didn't try to dodge the next one, and an explosion thundered in the arena. Benjamin was already happy that he was able to win this fight so easily. But when the smoke cleared, Shannon stood in the arena, unharmed, with a calm smile on his face. This shocked Benjamin so much that he was momentarily speechless, but then began to attack with greater force, summoning more magic panels. In response, Shannon also cast a spell and summoned water. It formed in the air in an instant, gathered into a shield, and extinguished all the fireballs. 2 people watched the fight from the windows of the VIP room. The man was greatly puzzled by Shannon's ability to summon water in such a short time, practically instantly. An attractive woman in glasses stood next to him, holding a tablet. In response to his remark, the woman addressed him as the master of the Blue Tower and asked if he had come to this exam, knowing that he would. Ken Barth, who has been a master of the Blue Tower for several years, replied that he did not expect this. He just saw an article about the guy on the internet, and he became interested in seeing him in person. The woman shook her head sadly and merely remarked that if his visit were known, there might be a great commotion. The magician himself understood this perfectly well, and therefore just laughed and stated that that's what VIP rooms are for. At that moment, someone's presence was felt outside the door. When the guest entered the room, Ken greeted him happily. In the arena, Benjamin continued to attack Shannon over and over again, and each time the boy easily repelled all his attacks and even attacked back. In the blink of an eye, he was able to form a wind spear. Since the spear was a first-round spell, Benjamin was able to block it. He was even glad that with his level he couldn't be reached. Suddenly, a spear of wind flew past, turned around and attacked Benjamin from behind. The wound could only be called a scratch, but the fact that Shannon was able to control the release spell was puzzling. And not only the opponent in the arena, but also those watching from the VIP room. Shannon stood proudly in the arena, showing off his skills to everyone. He suddenly shaped his spear into a bird, then split it into 2 and attacked his enemy again. The way he was able to transform his spell amazed Benjamin greatly. Not believing his eyes, the boy asked if such a thing was even possible. Shannon just laughed, doubling his spells once more, and advised him not to get distracted if he wanted to block this attack. 4 wind birds rushed towards Benjamin. By activating the magical barrier panel, the guy was able to block everything. After all, despite the number of attacks, they were still a first circle spell. Suddenly, one of the spears shifted its trajectory and struck him in the back. This broke Benjamin's concentration. The attacks followed one after another, and Benjamin came to the conclusion that this was not actually a spear spell, but a reverse cutter spell, the range of which was limited. And if you stay out of reach, the enemy won't be able to hit him from a blind spot. Noticing that his opponent was keeping his distance, Shannon just laughed at the guy's cleverness, and with a clap combined all the released birds into one. The cutters gathered together turned into a wind spear in the form of a huge bird, which attacked with incredible force. The ability to combine spells greatly amazed the guests of the VIP room. Ken Barth turned to the guest who had arrived earlier with surprise and asked him to explain this. However, HEIR only remained silent in response. As the head of a respected family of magicians and a wizard of the 8th circle, he himself was puzzled by what his son was doing. It was only clear that the boy was ignoring all the rules for constructing the source code of spells. Each magic spell has set parameters and conditions of use that magicians know thoroughly. For example, the wind magic reverse cutter, on which Shannon's birds were based, did have a limited range, but the trajectory of movement could only be changed once per activation. Because of the predictability of spells, the battles of mages turned into a battle of wits and reactions. The main qualities were considered to be the ability to clearly predict the opponent's actions and immediately react to the counteraction. However, the guy's magical style completely ignored the spell's prescribed data and was completely unpredictable. Another blow from the guy sent Benjamin to the floor. Chuckling, Shannon activated water magic in the form of a water ball in front of the boy. And then, explaining that you can't underestimate the magic of the first circle just because you are a third circle mage, he attacked him in the face. With precise control over the shape of the spell, the boy formed a water ball around Benjamin's head. For safety reasons, all of the students' uniforms were enchanted with a magical barrier. Therefore, when they were hit by attack spells, the students would not suffer much. But in the case where the magic got inside the body and blocked the guy's airways, the barrier was completely useless. Benjamin lost consciousness from lack of oxygen, and silence fell over the arena for a while. Then, the instructor monitoring the fight announced the end of the match and the victory of Shannon HEIR. As Shannon left the arena, he remembered that old feeling of winning competitions as a child. His victory, his magic also deeply interested the head of the Blue Tower of Magicians. Outside the arena, Shannon was greeted with congratulations by Jean Suval. The friend was very excited about the guy's fight, especially the attacks he was able to carry out. He began to zealously pester the guy with questions about the training method he was using, since he was able to develop so much in such a short time. And what kind of magic was this? But he only grinned slyly and said that this magic was his secret. The next day, Jean found Shannon watching the news online. A video of yesterday's fight and an interview was posted. Then, reporters bombarded the guy with questions about what kind of magic he used, how he achieved such combinations, and so on. And suddenly, the head of the Blue Tower of Magic intervened in their conversation. He explained to reporters that it was the magic of a fourth circle spell. This spell allows mages to activate spells whose structure they have memorized, thereby reducing the activation time. But since it only allows the use of magic much lower than the user's level, it is not very popular and therefore not very well known. Shannon did not refuse this explanation, and at the same time the delusion of those around him that he had reached the fourth circle. The guy answered the question about the structure of the spells themselves, explaining that it is very easy to bypass the source code if you modify the formula yourself. He called such magic modified. Everyone realized that it was not easy to do, and in fact, the guy led to a revolution in magic. After watching the interview together, Jin stated with skepticism that he would never believe what the guy said there, but stopped the interrogation. His opponent tomorrow would be very strong, so he went to the dorm to get a good rest and prepare before the fight. The next day, Jin's fight took place in the academy arena. Shannon was there, of course, to support his friend, and he was also curious about the kind of tough opponent he would be facing. In the arena, facing Jin was a tall blonde girl named Amanda Stewart, a young genius of the Divine Guardian's house. This house was different from others in that it was able to supplement its magic with the attribute of the moon. The girl activated the magic by summoning a large magic circle. Jin managed to set up a barrier, but it couldn't withstand the impact of the girl's magical wave and shattered into pieces. The mana strike was so powerful that the guy was thrown across the arena almost to the edge. The match was over and Amanda emerged victorious. All this time, Shannon watched the battle carefully, thinking about the characteristics of the girl's spells. It was clear that the combination of light and dark attributes created something similar to the moonlight. This combination gave its own special properties that did not fall into the standard characteristics of the source code. This made the guy seriously think about countermeasures. At that moment, Amanda, leaving the arena, turned her head towards the audience and met Shannon's gaze. After the fight, Jin was incredibly upset about the loss, and his boyfriend tried to console his friend. At this time, Amanda approached them. The girl admitted that Jin was a strong opponent, and the guys exchanged a few pleasantries. Then the girl looked Shannon straight in the eyes. She wanted to confirm with the guy whether he could really start doing magic. It was important to her. The thing is, Amanda and Shannon knew each other before they were enrolled in the academy. Their families are closely intertwined, and the children often crossed paths at various events. And their personal relationship could be described as a rivalry between two geniuses. The girl even refused to go abroad to study, just to get into the obelisk and crush Shannon. However, from the moment it turned out that the guy was not able to accept interactive magic, the girl never spoke to him. It was a hard blow to her that the opponent she had been so eager to defeat suddenly became a nobody. It was as if all her previous efforts had been erased. For the first time in 2 years, Amanda spoke to him, and the first thing she asked was if he had really learned to do magic. The boy didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Having answered her something like that it was true, but he was still far from her. Shannon, to his surprise, received the answer that in battle she would definitely find out. And after that, Amanda walked away. The guy looked at her in surprise, not quite understanding her words. Then Jean, like a true friend, explained that Amanda would be Shannon's opponent in his next fight. And this news really stunned the guy. When the day of the fight arrived, Amanda waited in the academy arena for the fight to begin. For some reason, Shannon was still missing. The spectators were discussing that the opponent had gotten scared and refused to fight, and the judge was about to award the girl a technical victory. But then Shannon burst into the arena, disheveled and out of breath, apologizing for being late. The referee got angry, but allowed the fight to begin, although he didn't give the guy a chance to catch his breath, ordering him to take up positions. While warming up before the fight, the girl asked him why he was late for their duel, to which the guy replied with a broad smile that one cannot go into a fight with such a strong opponent as Amanda without preparation. So he prepared until the last moment. The match began and Amanda was the first to activate her fire attribute spell, Flame Revolver. 3 powerful fire bolts, accompanied by a deafening roar, headed towards Shannon at high speed. There was a feeling that no one could cope with them, but the guy managed to put up a barrier. All the fireballs crashed into a dense stream of wind. At that moment, the girl cast an Earth-type spell, activating the Earth Needles. The arena floor split, and spikes popped out right under the guy's feet. To dodge them, Shannon jumped into the air. Thinking that this was a chance and the guy would hardly be able to dodge in the air, Amanda activated an airstrike. But the guy seemed to be waiting for exactly this, casting another spell. A barrier appeared right in the air under his feet, on which Shannon stood quite steadily. Neither the audience nor the girl herself could believe their eyes. It was a reversible barrier that he used as a support. Standing high above the arena, the guy was as bright as the sun, literally blinding the girl's eyes. Expecting an attack from above, Amanda activated a protective barrier. Shannon hit him with all his might with a first circle spell, Airblade. The shockwave from the collision of the 2 spells threw the guy back, and he landed with one hand on the arena floor. The girl was just about to attack when she suddenly felt something strange. Her leg was tied to the arena floor with earthen bonds. At first, she didn't understand when exactly the guy did it, because there was no spell. And then she realized that it happened when, as he fell, his hand touched the arena floor. Without wasting any time, Shannon unleashed the next magical blast against his opponent. 3 water balls formed in the air and rushed towards the girl in the shape of dolphins. Having freed herself from the bonds, Amanda once again put up the 3rd circle air barrier, which was able to block all attacks. The girl even sighed with relief and smiled with confidence that she could handle it. Shannon was officially considered a 4th circle mage and used memorization magic for high-speed attacks. Therefore, all his spells, although unusual, remained only 1st circle. Suddenly, the spell literally fell on the girl's head and hit her from behind. Amanda immediately recognized it as a modified version of the air spear he used in the battle with Benjamin. Shannon was able to hide in the girl's blind spot, using the sun's light as cover. The fight, as the first time, was watched by people in the VIP room. These were also Ken Barth with his assistant and Egan Hainer. The leader of the Blue Tower discussed the boy's sequence of actions, analyzing each step. He highly praised how skillfully the boy used the spells available to him, and even recalled the nickname he had recently acquired, the most skilled magician of the 1st circle. But Shannon's father was still unhappy with what was happening, because despite the advantages the boy had earned in the battle, he was still unable to deliver the decisive blow. In the arena, Amanda recovered from the blow quite quickly and decided to use all her opportunities to express all her admiration for the fight. To confirm her words, the girl activated the moon attribute. This is a special magic of the Guardian House called Halo. A large, multi-layered magic circle formed above the girl. Then the guy was hit by a huge pressure of magical power that was emitted at that moment. A bright light filled the battle arena, engulfing everything in it. In the VIP room, Egan Hainer stood up from his seat and headed for the exit. For him, the battle was already over. But then the surprised cry of Ken Barth's assistant caught everyone's attention, and everyone looked at the arena. The light on it had dissipated. To the surprise of everyone present, Shannon stood in the arena as if nothing had happened, completely unharmed, with a fire-type magic circle beginning to form behind his back. In it, Amanda was surprised to recognize the magic of the 2nd circle, called Fire Volcano. The presence of this spell in the guy's arsenal could only mean one thing. Shannon Hunter reached the 5th round. The night before the fight, Shannon sat in his student dorm for a long time thinking about how he could win this fight. Amanda was a pretty strong opponent, and the guy, although he wasn't afraid to fight her, still wanted to do it later, when he gained some strength. Opening the book, Shannon found a new page with notes. The new formula required magical power to be poured into it, and when the boy did so, the book began to glow very brightly. The outgoing light literally swallowed the guy's existence, teleporting him to an unknown location. And when it went out, there was no one else in the room. When Shannon came to, he could see around him a certain office full of shelves with books. Suddenly, a female voice greeted him. Behind the guy there was a girl with very strange eyes who introduced herself as Alpha. She explained that she was the conductor responsible for testing the first page, which was hidden inside the book. Then, the guy realized that in fact he was not teleported, as he had previously assumed, but was transferred to a certain spatial dimension. Alpha continued to explain that the first test would test the receiver's intentions. If he successfully overcomes everything, he will be given access to pages containing information about the second circle. Without thinking, the guy agreed to undergo the tests immediately, because it could help him in the upcoming battle. And then the conductor activated the start of the test. Alpha began to turn into particles of light. Initially, it was clear that the creature in front of him was not a human, but a magical entity. But it was surprising. When the girl completely disappeared, Rebel's voice was heard and a floating stone appeared. The voice explained that the stone in front of Shannon was an elemental gem, and it contained an indefinite amount of natural elements that moved randomly. And its task is to set the final order of the mana in the chamber. Elemental gems always require a delicate approach and careful handling, as the elements they contain, when mixed, create chaos. The mana inside them is like a mixture of grains of sand, salt, sugar, and pepper, and the goal of the mission was to somehow separate all of this. To achieve this, one must master the technique of the mind. This seemed insanely difficult to Shannon, but also so interesting. The magician of the past transmitted this technique directly into the consciousness of his student, and the boy began to study it. It wasn't easy, because any extra fluctuation in mana would create a shockwave, and the guy would get hit hard. Time and time again the boy failed, again and again, until finally I was able to do everything perfectly, and the master's voice confirmed it. Waking up in his room, the guy spent a long time trying to figure out whether everything that happened was a dream or not. But when he looked at the book, he saw pages dedicated to the second circle of magic, the circle of resonance. When Amanda activated the halo in the arena, many thought that the fight was over. Even the girl herself was about to leave the arena, confident in her victory and regretting that the goal she had been chasing for so long was no more. But suddenly, unexpected events began to happen behind her back, which made the girl turn around in surprise and shock. Shannon stood firmly on his feet in the arena and activated the magic of the second circle. In his mind, the guy carried out the fusion of the first and second circles of infinity. By combining the elements of fire and darkness through resonance, the boy created magical hands that literally tore Amanda's halo apart, stunning everyone present. Even though her attack failed, the girl was happy because her target had returned again. Shannon, having summoned a fiery volcano spell, used resonance to give it the shape of a Gatling gun and opened fire on the girl. Amanda's defense failed and the girl fell to the arena floor unconscious. The guy dropped to his knees in exhaustion, and at that moment the stadium exploded with loud screams, and the referee announced Shannon Heiner's victory. In the VIP room, Egan Heiner was getting ready to leave again, and when the head of the Blue Tower asked him where he was going, he replied that he needed to fulfill a promise. Outside the arena, Shen felt like a squeezed lemon and was incredibly happy that no one bothered him or pestered him with questions. When the resonance synchronized with the first circle in his head, it helped him cope with Amanda's magic. And the magic control technique helped him decipher the structure of lunar magic. And while the guy was trying to comprehend everything, the master of the Blue Tower of Mages called out to him. Ken Barth invited the guy to talk away from prying eyes. The man wondered if the boy had already reached the fifth circle, since he had used a second-level spell in the fight. Shen denied this, and when asked how he used that spell, he explained it as a personal modification of the memorization magic. Then Ken wondered if he was really able to upgrade such magic or if he was hiding something. Of course, this statement was so surprising that it was easier to believe that an 18-year-old boy could still reach the fifth circle. Neji was able to overcome the shortcomings of this spell, so the master used his red eye ability on the guy. After some time, Ken Barth calmly released Shannon and confirmed that he really had not lied about the fifth lap, and assured him that he would deal with the journalist himself, and that the guy should go and rest until the next fight. Shannon sighed with relief. Ken Barth's red eyes were shrouded in mystery. It was believed that the mage could see the essence of mana with this ability. Although they could not solve the boy's mystery, Waitner's magical style was his greatest secret, which he could not reveal to anyone. A little later, Shannon had another fight which he, of course, won. Outside the arena, Amanda called out to him. The guy was surprised, as he did not expect her to come to normal so quickly. The girl asked if they could discuss something after the finale. From the outside, it might even seem that the girl was trying to confess her love. But Shen immediately understood what she really wanted and suggested going to the waiting room to sort out their entire fight, which made the girl incredibly happy. At the same time, on the wide screen in the building of the subsidiary office of the Magic Tower, a young woman watched Shannon's interview with irritation. Her beautiful face was distorted by an unpleasant grimace, and she was clearly not pleased with the guy's victories, even though he was her younger brother. The girl's name was Sarah HEIR, the eldest daughter of the HEIR house, and she angrily asked the young man what she should do in this situation. The interviewee's name was Justin HEIR, and he was also Shannon and Sarah's older brother. Sarah was worried about what would happen to her if the boy was brought back to the house. The girl was not as gifted as Shannon, and therefore she was treated worse than him, which hurt her pride as the eldest daughter. Justin just laughed at the girl's worries. He hugged his sister and began to explain to her that there was no point in worrying now. After all, despite the achievements he had made, he was still incapable of interactive magic. And even if he had come up with a few tricks, he was still only a second rounder. Well, if he does become a threat to their position as heirs, then they will deal with him. After Shannon's last fight and another victory, Jean Suval caught him to congratulate him on his victory. The class teacher also came up to congratulate the boy. Everyone wanted to go and celebrate, but Shannon refused, citing that he already had a very important meeting for him. Upon leaving the academy, the boy was met by a driver with an expensive car to take him to the mansion for the meeting. After a long time, the guy stepped onto the threshold of the family home. When it became known that the boy was incompatible with interactive magic, Shannon, against his father's wishes, entered the academy and was forbidden to return home. Now he was here again to meet with the head of the house. He was waiting for him to talk in his office. Upon entering the office, Shannon was invited to sit in the chair opposite her father. Egan HEIR was the first to start the conversation, listing all of his son's shortcomings in magic and expressing his displeasure at his disobedience. He once again voiced what exactly he expected from him, since he was not destined to become a magician with such talent. He was disappointed, but still appreciated the achievements his son had made despite everything, and therefore he admits that his son's valor in battle was worthy of the title of a true wizard. Consequently, he lost the bet. From this point on, Shannon is once again recognized as one of the family's heirs and is allowed to enjoy all rights. But there was one condition. If the boy rolled down again or got stuck in one place, then Egan himself would personally destroy his son's magic circle. The guy had no choice but to accept this condition. After all the moralizing, the head asked his son about his future plans and goals. After all, in order to lead the family, Shannon needs to get around all of his brothers and sisters. To which the guy replied that he was going to make sure that everyone recognized him. And to do this, he was going to win the World Magic Olympiad in 2 months. The Magic Olympiad was held once a year, and only wizards under the age of 20 could participate. The boy promised to win gold there. Their country had never been higher than second place before, and the silver belonged to the current leader of the Blue Tower of Magic, and the guy was going to break that record. Egan HEIR wondered if his son realized how impossible this task was. To which Shannon confirmed that he was aware of everything and was completely confident that he could achieve this. However, he would have a request for his father. He asked his father not to let his older brothers and sisters interfere with him until the competition was over. Under any other circumstances, Egan HEIR would hardly have done this, but here he agreed. By morning, Shannon returned to his dorm room to continue studying. Wasting no time, he immediately began searching for rival Whitener's next test upon arrival, but found nothing. The only thing that came to his mind was that he needed to pump up his resonance to the level of a second circle master. And to do this, he was going to spend all his free time pouring magic into the resonance circle, forcing it to move in a cycle. As a result, he began to get 2 loops connected to each other but not merging. Having come up with nothing, the guy decided to take a walk and clear his head. Having reached the embankment, he walked calmly along the river. Suddenly, he heard a shout and something flew straight into his face. Everything went dark in the guy's eyes, and a plastic bag with a rather heavy container appeared on his face. When the boy came to after the blow, Amanda appeared before him. It turned out that the girl had gone shopping at a nearby store and had bought a full carton of banana milk. She felt very ashamed in front of Shannon for the fact that he suffered because of her childish behavior and playing with the bag. The guy assured the girl that he was not at all offended, and they decided to walk together. The conversation turned to yesterday's trip home, and the fact that the guy still dreams of becoming the head of the house. This is exactly what he dreamed about as a child. In response, the guy assured Amanda that his dream was now not only to lead his house, but also to stand at the head of a magic tower. That evening, at the HEIR family home, Sarah discussed with Justin what their father had told them. Earlier, he had called the older children into his office and given them orders that they were not to even think about touching Shannon for the next few months. Justin was bothered not so much by his father's order, but by the reason that he had not really told the children. He was not very concerned about his middle brother and sister, as they had little interest in the struggle for the leadership of the family. But with Shannon, things were different. He had previously clearly voiced his desires, and now he was accepted back into the house, and even with protection for 2 months. This thought was constantly spinning in his head. After discussing all the possible reasons for such an order, the brother and sister came to the conclusion that the younger one had made some kind of deal with their father. It also became clear that due to the order, they both would have to recall all the spies if they did not want them to die at the hands of the Shadows. The Shadows were a squad of elite spies who worked directly for the head of the family. Justin didn't like the idea of giving Shannon time to fulfill his deal with his father, so he decided to turn to the Black Magic Tower for help. After passing the midterm assessment, Shannon was congratulated in class for winning first place. When presenting the certificate, the class teacher suggested that the boy maintain the same level of academic performance in order to get into the International Olympiad. Shannon confirmed that this was exactly what he intended to do and sat down in his seat. Naturally, not everyone in the class liked this, and some continued to gossip about the guy, claiming that he would slide down the ladder in the next exams. After class, Shannon and Jean were walking home together, and the guys started talking about their practice starting next week and how it would be nice to go to the gym. However, Jin chose to refuse the latter, arguing that it was impossible to go to the gym with his friend since he became incredibly scary during training. The amount of effort and dedication Shannon put into training on the machines truly scared the people around him. But the guy was very worried about the fact that during his training in the Waitner style, he completely neglected training, and their importance was also mentioned in the Magician's book. This was necessary to improve the circulation of the infinity circles. Later, he also went to the magical beast arena to train with monsters. The result was the highest score, which could not but please the guy. Improving the physical body led to a faster reaction. But to move to the third circle, it was necessary to strengthen the circles of infinity, which Shen did at every free opportunity. It wasn't easy, but the guy decided to bring his synchronization with the circles to 100% in the near future. During one of his jogging workouts, Shannon was attacked from around the corner. This surprised the boy, as his father had promised protection from his elders. But when he saw that the attacker was Benjamin Samard, the boy was even more surprised. Shannon hadn't had any dealings with him lately, or even seen him at all. Shen couldn't help but tease Benjamin, making him even more angry. After all, the latter had always caused trouble before, hiding behind his family name. And now that he had lost to Shannon in the testing, it was easy to provoke the guy. Naturally, Benjamin fell for the trick and attacked Shannon with combat magic, which was strictly prohibited in residential areas. The guy had to take control of the crazed blonde and immobilize him. Security soon arrived and Benjamin was handed over to guard. Although he resisted, the surveillance camera footage was used as evidence, so Benjamin Samard could not escape punishment. The next day, a warning notice was posted about Benjamin's violation, but he was only given 10 penalty points. This caused some excitement at the academy. Benjamin Samard belonged to a rather influential family, which in turn made large donations to the academy. That's why the guy got off so easily in public. But the father personally scolded the boy over the phone, warning him that if the family had any problems because of him, he would be held fully responsible. After such a conversation, Benjamin was so furious that he smashed his phone. However, he never admitted his guilt, shifting all responsibility to Shannon and throwing a tantrum. It was then that Instructor Smith approached him, and instead of calming the guy down or explaining what he was doing wrong, he began to push him towards revenge. That evening, Shannon sat in his room, thinking about what had happened and texting his father. He wrote that in exchange for turning a blind eye to Benjamin's attack, the Samard family would give the HEIR family a share of their magic stone mines. Naturally, the HEIRs were pleased with this. The Samard family needed to obtain an official title, and to do so they had to have good relations with everyone. Therefore, they were forced to make such concessions because the victim was the direct heir of the House of HEIR. The next day, Shannon noticed that the academy had increased security. And while he was looking at the innovations, Instructor Smith approached him. Under the pretext of reconciliation and congratulations on first place in the tests, the instructor extended his hand for a handshake. At that moment, Shannon felt a sense of dark mana. This led him to believe that Instructor Smith might be a representative of the Black Tower of Magic. The Black Tower was an unofficial group of criminals led by a mage who called himself the King of Black Magic. And if the instructor really belonged to her, then the guy was not safe at all at the academy. To understand what Smith was up to, Shannon decided to take apart the structure of the spell. And having understood it, he recognized in it the formula for mind control magic. Instructor Smith clearly wanted to cast this spell on the boy's mind. Due to the peculiarities of the body's constitution, the guy's mind had a high resistance to external influences. But to find out the goals, Shannon decided to play along and pretend to be hypnotized. Satisfied with the result, Instructor Smith began to express indignation because, although not seriously, he had to apologize to such a defective character. Then he ordered the guy to take the chip and always carry it with him, without asking why. The guy agreed with a blank expression. The instructor then demanded to know about the modification of magic that Shannon was using. Since the guy couldn't do this, he pretended that he had a severe headache. Instructor Smith decided that this was a subconscious defense, since the information was very important to the guy, and canceled the order. The principle of mind control magic was to penetrate the enemy's brain with targeted control. Only the Black Tower could use such a spell. High-level magicians were even capable of destroying a person's brain, and therefore such a spell was considered forbidden. If the order involved a particular topic for the person, they might show some resistance to the control. Increasing the control in this case could result in brain damage to the person. This is exactly what Shannon took advantage of. And if the instructor gave up so quickly, it means they didn't need knowledge about modification but something else. This upset Smith, and he promised to find out all this information later, when the main goal was achieved. He then stopped the magic and Shannon pretended to wake up. The instructor showed concern on his face, as the guy seemed to have withdrawn into himself during their conversation, and advised him to get more rest. Shannon agreed and they said goodbye and went their separate ways. Moving to a more secluded area, Shannon began to examine the chip. It turned out to be an illegal artificial intelligence chip. It was clear that the chip was given to the guy in order to frame him, making him appear to be a user of a prohibited product. Most likely, this was done in order to ruin the reputation that was beginning to rise. In Shannon's opinion, the instructor himself did not need this, although he did not get along with him. Therefore, it was done on someone's orders. The first person that came to mind was Benjamin Simard, but he was currently limited in his options. Therefore, there was a high probability that it was one of the older brothers or sisters. The middle sister Nina was not very interested in the struggle for power. The middle brother, Michael, did not usually resort to such methods, so Shannon calmly excluded both of them. But the older brother and sister were quite capable of this. To find out for sure, one could interrogate Smith, but then the Black Tower would not remain on the sidelines. Then the guy decided to contact the Blue Tower, directly to Ken Barth. Meeting with the head turned out to be not so difficult, but the guy was received very coldly. Ken was not in the best mood, but Shannon simply had no choice, since there might not be another chance at all. The leader was busy studying the unusual Mana Stone, and not everything was going smoothly in the research. Taking a quick glance at the object of study itself, the guy recognized it as an elemental Mana Stone. In order not to waste time and get back to research as soon as possible, Ken Barth hurried the guy to tell everything as quickly as possible. But Shannon was in no hurry to talk about the matter that interested him, since it was clear that in such a mood they would not listen to him seriously, and even more so, they would not help him. That's why he started talking about the Philosopher's Stone. This surprised and attracted Ken's attention. He even suspected the guy of spying, since the stone was discovered quite recently and even the name had not yet been made public. Then Shannon took out exactly the same stone from his bag, but this stone was already perfectly tuned for use. The thought that the boy himself was able to tune the stone shocked the chief so much that he even lost the power of speech for a while. It was astonishing, as even the famous Mana Stone mages from the Red and Blue Towers couldn't figure it out. It was very hard to believe that an ordinary student could cope with this. Ken Barth suggested that the guy was very lucky in this regard. Shannon didn't deny it and pretended that that was exactly why he came. Ken asked him to explain how he was able to set up the camera. Shannon replied that he himself didn't know how. It just happened that way. The chief didn't believe him, but promised not to interrogate him and asked to take a closer look. He was fascinated by the way the stone maintained all four elements in balance within itself. Shannon said he wanted to make an artifact out of it, no matter what shape it was, as long as it increased the effectiveness of elemental magic. Then the conversation turned to paying for the remaining materials, and Ken suggested sending the invoice to the boy's father, but he refused. It was clear that the guy wanted to keep the existence of such an artifact a secret from his family. The amount was not small, and Ken asked how the guy wanted to pay the bill in that case. Shannon suggested tuning all the elemental stones in the tower, and the master could observe the process. That is, he offered the method as payment. Naturally, Master Ken agreed. And then Shannon started talking about what he came here for in the first place. He showed the master the chip and told him how it came into his possession. He said that there were magicians from the Black Tower in the academy and asked for help in getting rid of them. It was late, and the assistant of the head of the Blue Tower drove the guy home. Already lying in bed, the guy rethought everything that had happened to him during the day. It was amazing to meet the stone elemental in the tower chief's office and get the artifact at my disposal. The conversation that had just happened came to mind again. Ken had initially been skeptical of the guy's words about the Black Tower. After all, the only evidence was this chip. But I still decided to believe and help investigate this whole situation. A few days later, Shannon was riding the elevator up to the upper floors where the restaurant was located. At the same time, he had a telephone conversation with a man from the Blue Tower. After clarifying a few points, the young man hung up and left the elevator. Entering the private room, Shannon greeted those who had already arrived. All his older brothers and sisters were gathered at the table. Nina HEIR was the first to greet him. The girl was really happy to see her brother a year later. Then he was greeted by Mikhail Connor. As always, the middle brother was terribly honest and straightforward. Shannon was the last to greet her older brother and sister. Justin managed to put a happy smile on his face and say a few empty compliments. Sarah greeted her younger brother with a not very happy face. Everyone sat down at the dinner table and began to eat. Justin wondered why the youngest had suggested that they all meet and have lunch together. In response, the guy just shook his head and said that he simply missed everyone. And at the same time, he made the assumption that the elders would have gathered them together anyway for one reason or another. Sarah was not a patient person by nature and exploded almost immediately, deciding that the younger one did not respect her at all. So she demanded an answer as to whether he was going to resume his competition with the others for the right to be the head of the family. To which Shannon only chuckled and said that it was a stupid question because his sister wouldn't believe a negative answer anyway, which meant there was no point in answering. The young woman became even more furious, but Justin was able to calm her down with a few words. Then, as if by chance, he inquired about the modification of magic that his younger brother used, and asked him to share his knowledge with his family. Of course, it would be right to tell his family everything, but this request was a test to see if the guy would participate in the race for supremacy or not. Only Shannon was fully prepared for such a turn of events and prepared himself. Making sad eyes and squeezing out a tear, the guy pretended to be very unhappy, explaining that, as a person incompatible with interactive magic, this secret was the only thing he could count on. Oddly enough, Nina was taken in by his tears and supported his idea of not telling his secret to others. Mikhail then supported him, so the rest could only accept it. The rest of the dinner proceeded in a fairly peaceful atmosphere with casual conversations and laughter, as is expected at a family dinner. At some point, everyone received an urgent notification on their phones at once, surprising everyone. Almost everyone's reaction to it was equally outraged, with the exception of Justin, whose face was distorted with obvious disappointment. The report stated that Academy instructor Latimer Smith had been arrested on suspicion of being a member of the Black Tower, having been caught attempting to sabotage equipment used to conduct a survival test for Academy students. It was only for a moment, but Shannon noticed. After lunch, the boy went home and on the way, contacted Ken Barth on the phone. Tom wondered how the guy knew that Smith would try to sabotage the equipment today. To which the guy replied that if you put together the information about the presence of a person from the Black Tower, the time of the test, and the desire to ruin Shannon's reputation, then sabotaging the test was simply begging to be done. And the easiest way to damage the equipment would be immediately after checking its integrity. It was easy to predict that Smith would go do it today. And it was for this reason that Jean Su, the chief's assistant, was able to catch him at the crime scene. Anticipating all this, the guy asked the head of the Blue Tower to keep an eye on the equipment room in advance, and he himself went to have lunch with his family. Smith was eventually arrested. It also became clear that it was Justin who maintained contact with the mage from the Black Tower. Although the evidence for the latter was only circumstantial, the guy was quite satisfied with that. After saying goodbye to Shannon, Ken promised to pay him back somehow for today, as this incident had greatly raised the reputation of the Blue Tower. And when the guy hung up, there was a powerful explosion behind him. Sean was thrown into the air by the shockwave and thrown to the side. A silhouette emerged from the smoke, and a strangely familiar male voice was heard calling his name. When the smoke cleared, Shannon recognized Benjamin Simard. His condition and behavior puzzled and worried the boy. The mage immediately activated a series of fire spells as soon as he saw Shannon's face. The guy had to immediately enter resonance and activate the water shield. The attacks were stronger than usual, and the teenager tried to connect several shields together. The resulting static water shield eventually failed, and the fire spells exploded next to the guy. Shannon was thrown to the side and hit his back hard. Even his hand was burned. Benjamin burst into abnormal laughter and began to scold his opponent. He looked abnormal. Bloodshot eyes, reddened skin, drooling. It all resembled a reaction to a banned drug called Berserker. When it was used, the magic circles were forcibly accelerated, but the blood vessels began to burst, turning the skin and mucous membranes red. The scariest thing about this drug was that a person would fight until he died. Benjamin attacked, activating a spell that Shannon recognized as Flame Infection. The spell was activated from such a close distance that it was simply impossible not to get hurt. The explosion occurred at a short distance and Shannon fell to the ground in front of Benjamin. The latter was very surprised that the guy was still alive. The fact that the guy managed to block his attacks time and time again really pissed Benjamin off. He just didn't understand how this could happen. Shannon somehow managed to get to his feet and analyze the guy's actions. Some things didn't add up according to all the calculations. The magic power that Benjamin attacked with was too great for a berserker alone to have such an effect. Which means there was something else. Shannon decided to test his guesses and activated the wind spear. The bird spells flew towards the opponent, just like in a passing test. This time Benjamin was able to dodge them, but for some reason he did not recognize the magic itself. Taking advantage of the fact that the guy was distracted by the spells, Shannon jumped up to Benjamin and delivered an airstrike from below upwards into the guy's face. He didn't dodge and Shannon hit it. Having let them get so close, Benjamin activated the fire attribute spell, Fire Shot. This spell was very powerful at close range with a range of about 7 meters. But what was attacking him now was an order of magnitude more powerful. Shannon caught his breath and wondered how much one had to hate someone to not only use illegal drugs, but also implant an illegal chip into themselves. Benjamin, however, did not admit that he used anything like that, claiming that he could win without it. Shannon realized that the guy also had problems with his memory and needed serious help. He only became even more angry and began to activate one spell after another. Thinking out loud, Shannon lamented that the illegal chip increased all of the user's parameters too much and was difficult to control. Ironically, what Shannon had recently been looking for was precisely related to amplification. And as he watched the forbidden chip and potion alter the structure of his magic spells, he had a revelation. The answer was resonance. The chips allowed the use of magic one level higher than the original, and Shannon realized that he could enhance his magic in the same way by combining the currents of magic circles to speed it up. The problem was the consequences of the resulting load. The time it took for a second-round master to use such acceleration was only 3 minutes. After that, the circle stopped for 12 hours. The price could have big consequences. For this reason, Shannon had a full 3 minutes at his disposal. By activating the earth needles, the boy was able to reach Benjamin from a distance, piercing his leg. The needles represented third circle magic, and their appearance greatly surprised Benjamin. The injuries didn't slow him down for long, and another fire-type spell flew towards Shannon. Shannon blocked it with a water shield. Only this time, the water spell was able to deactivate the fire. Benjamin's magic was no longer a threat to him. This finally enraged the latter, and he rushed at the guy head-on, thereby falling into the activated magic of the dark attribute, Dark Blindness, which completely blinded him. Next came spells such as Earthbind and Airbind, which tangled the boy tightly, immobilizing him. Benjamin tried to break out of this confinement, but nothing worked. Shannon came up behind him and, before the boy could even process anything, fired a single, short, directed pulse of mana into the chip, overloading it. The chip overload caused the body to overload, which in turn led to severe pain, and this knocked him unconscious. When it was all over, Shannon dialed his father's number and called him. The man answered the phone and asked why he had called him, especially so late. Shen just waved it off, saying he would never believe he didn't know what had happened. It was all too quiet for a battle to have taken place, and the absence of passers-by indicated that the situation was unnatural. He also noticed an observer who did not interfere in anything. Only his father could have done something like that to prevent the consequences of the fight. Moreover, due to the agreement between them, the older siblings could not interfere or be nearby. Egan Honor laughed when he heard his son's arguments and admitted that it was his observer who was there, and that it was he who assigned a shadow named Sorrel to the guy. At this time, other shadows appeared to deal with the aftermath. Egan Hainer repeated his question again, and the guy replied that he was just calling to brag about his third round. This surprised the man and even made him suspect that his son was deliberately hiding the third circle, since there was no hint of its appearance. Shannon didn't deny it, but since he was only using lap acceleration, the third lap wasn't actually true. The boy understood perfectly well that even if he actually had 3 circles, he would not be able to cope with his older brother and sister. And so he reminded them of the agreement and asked them not to tell them about what had happened. They would not like the achievements of the younger one. The man promised to sort everything out and send a car for the guy. After hanging up the phone, Egan Hainer burst into a satisfied laugh, and Shannon greeted the shadow as if it were an old friend. Taking off his mask, Sorrel greeted him back in the same manner. Shadow was bothered by the burn on the boy's face and he used healing magic, but it only provided minimal help. Thanking them for their help, Shannon headed to the car, leaving everything else in the shadows. Sorrel returned the mask to its place and began his task. Justin Hainer was in a bad mood when he entered his apartment. An uninvited guest was waiting for him in the living room. He greeted Justin and introduced himself as a mage from the Black Tower. The guest complained with a grin that the man's order had gone wrong due to the Blue Tower's interference. Justin was angered by the laughter. After all, his order had failed. The magician spread his hands in a conciliatory manner and said that it was his personal habit to laugh at everything, and that since the order had failed, the tower would return the money with a guarantee that the client was safe. There is no need to worry about any information leaking, because Smith will be gone by morning. Justin didn't really care about the instructor's life. He was more concerned about the potion and the chips, and how to make sure that information about them couldn't be calculated. And then the magician assured again that there was no need to worry. Benjamin Simard could do or say nothing more, since he was little different from a corpse after what had happened. The man told Justin about the altercation between Benjamin and Shannon, which is why the former is now incapacitated. Then Justin demanded information about his brother. The magician explained that nothing had really happened to the younger Hainer. He had just gotten a little scratched. Justin couldn't believe it because Benjamin was under the influence of both the potion and the chip at the same time. Then, the magician also told about the presence of a shadow observer with the guy, who did not allow anyone to find out about the skirmish. Justin realized that the shadows were aware of all the events that had taken place, and asked the magician if he knew since when a shadow had been assigned to his younger brother. He said that he noticed the shadow only recently, so he couldn't say for sure. Justin was puzzled that his brother was guarded by Sorrel, who was essentially the leader of the shadows. The presence of shadows meant a huge increase in difficulty, and you had to be extremely careful, which meant that you wouldn't be able to get the guy for a while. As for the chip that Shannon received from Smith, it had a self-destruct program installed, so there is nothing to worry about there either. Having sorted out all the questions, the magician left. Justin thought about the need to urgently get rid of all the evidence in order to avoid the suspicions of the head of the shadows, Sorrel. Sometime later, Shannon was studying in his dorm room. In the morning, he was informed that instructor Smith had died of a heart attack. The guy guessed that such an outcome was also possible. The only good thing was that the shadows had properly settled all the consequences of the duel. At that moment, a message came on the phone that the Simard family had paid 43% of the profits from their mine to hush up the matter. Egan Hainer was pleased, because it was a large sum even for their family. Then the guy turned his attention to the announcement of the Academic Magic Olympiad. There were 53 days left until it, and the countdown had already begun. The guy was even more pleased that the penalty time for using the acceleration of mana circles ended, and now it was possible to start training again. It was necessary to reach the third circle as soon as possible. Shannon poured mana into the book, and I was transported to its pages. When the guy opened his eyes, he found himself in an empty white space. He was met by a guide, just like last time. The entity introduced itself as Beta and the conductor of the second test. Shannon was curious to know the nature of the test, but he didn't say anything out loud. Beta continued to tell the story without the guy's words. The second page's test was to test one's mastery of the current mana circles. It was also said that if it was successfully completed, the next block of information would open, containing data about the third circle. This news made the guy happy. A special note from Beta is that there will be almost twice as many pages as in the previous block. But it also meant that the third circle was much more difficult to achieve. And then the magical entity announced the beginning of the test. After this, the voice of Ribel Weitner was heard in space, who began to talk about the second test. 100 magic circles will appear in front of the guy one by one, and he will need to activate them all. To do this, you will need to synchronize each one with their own resonance circle, after which everything will happen automatically. When the guy started testing, it turned out that each magic circle was being updated every 3 seconds. If you don't manage to synchronize within this time frame, you'll have to start all over again. At first, although the guy was surprised, he decided that if he constantly checked all the actions, he would be able to remember the sequence. But then, the master's voice announced that the sequence of circles would also change to prevent simple memorization. Sighing sadly, the guy took on the tests. When was Shannon able to come back? He felt like he had run a marathon. It took him 8 hours straight to complete the test, but the best he could manage was 10 laps in a row. But he didn't want to give up because of this. The guy wondered if there was some kind of pattern to this. While studying the information on the pages of Idrid, Shannon read that there were other books by the great magician and they could also be found. These books were also meant to help in the development of the student. The news that Idris was not the only book by Ribel Weitner greatly surprised the guy. This meant that, although he knew nothing about other books, it was still worth looking for information about them. Tired of being cooped up in his room, Shannon went for a walk outside. On the way, the guy met Amanda again, who had bought a ton of banana milk. The guy sat down to chat for a bit. Noticing small circles under the girl's eyes, the guy asked if she had slept at night. Amanda admitted that she came across an interesting book called Possibilities of Technical Implementation of Teleportation Magic. Both the book and the topic it touched on were incredibly interesting to the girl, so she insisted that Shannon read it right away. Under pressure from the girl, he had no choice but to sit down and read everything. When Shannon finished, he returned the book to Amanda. But then one moment in the conclusion caught his attention. It stated that these conclusions were made based on an analysis of information from ancient manuscripts by Ribel Weitner. This immediately made the guy reread everything again and more carefully. After a more thoughtful study, the guy came to the conclusion that, although the book used a number of the theories of the great magician, the information was very superficial. Then he became interested in finding out who the author of this work was. The girl named George Sand. Shannon later looked up George Sandy and learned that he was a magical researcher about whom virtually nothing was known. Even age and gender were not indicated anywhere, and this article was his only work. Unable to find any more information, the guy decided to use a deeper source, namely the head of the Blue Tower.